Good morning and welcome to China Forum. I'm Corinne Milliken, and today we're going to be talking with Professor Wang about his recently published book, George W. Bush, Policies, Problems, and Partnerships. The book was published this November by Lexington Books, a division of Rowman and Littlefield Publishers. Professor Wang, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me today, and my pleasure to be here today and talk about my books. I enjoy talking to you.
Wonderful. I wanted to take this opportunity to ask you about when you started writing the book and what inspired you. What was your initial interest in writing about the Bush administration?
Actually, I started a research paper back to 2001 because I was interested in George Herbert Walker Bush China policy when he was the President of the United States, and also when he was at the U.S. envoy in China in 1974 and 75. Because he was one of the most, he was one of the experts on China relations before he became President of the United States. So I was wondering whether his son, George W. Bush, after he became President of the United States in 2001, what kind of policy that he will implement toward China during his presidency from 2001. And so I began to follow his statements and press releases, and also look into what his background, whether he has any interest in China or not. In fact, during his campaign, I was asked by Asian American group, which belong to support Republican parties, asked me as a professor teaching U.S.-China relations to write a 3-page briefing paper. What I would recommend to George W. Bush, if he became president, what kind of China policy would look like. That's made me get things started, interested in President Bush's China policy. So I continued to follow his statements. And then by the time after the 9/11 tragedy, I completed about 20 pages paper. And I circulated my paper to my students studying my class, and also I circulated the paper to my colleagues in Washington, D.C., many of them former ambassador to China, former Assistant Secretary of Defense, and a number of other professors in local universities. And they all review my paper. This is a very interesting paper. Maybe, Professor, you should continue. Expand the paper into maybe some kind of a report. Mm-hmm. So I just followed their advice and continued to keep up following what President W. Bush George W. Bush policy toward China. And I collected about many newspaper clippings. And because first, I think I remember, he was interviewed by ABC's news journalist, Charlie Gibson, asking about what U.S. going to do with Taiwan being attacked by mainland China. And he said, I'll do everything possible to defend Taiwan. So that created a lot of anxiety and curiosity of what he's going to do. Later on, he retracted the statement. That's became a very interesting period. And later on, there was a American airplane, EP-3, and was down conflict with the Chinese over Hainan Island in southern China. And an American airplane, an intelligence airplane, was landed on Hainan Island. And then it was a number of negotiations between U.S. ambassador in China, Admiral Joe Prayer. He was the U.S. ambassador during Clinton period. At the beginning of a Bush period, he was still the American ambassador. So he was the one negotiating with China to settle the EP-3 airplane incident. That involved President Bush, Secretary of State Colin Powell, and also, of course, the Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld, and so many other member of Congress were involved input what we should do with China. So that became a very tense moment. So that's including part of my book. So this is why I said, by 2007, I almost cover the major events, major policy statement by President Bush toward China. A lot of people say, maybe you should put them together as a small book. I think maybe I'll try. So I put them together like a chronicle what happened from Bush day one to the time 2007, 1 year before he going to step down as the President of the United States. Later on, I submitted the manuscript to Rowman and Littlefield. They said they want to publish the book, but I must change some of the contents. I said, this is not, I hope it's not a censorship. She said, no, it's not censorship. Why you want? Because he said, we send out for people to review, peer reviews. There's something that they're missing from the book about human rights. So I just added a postscript about why, what I think about human rights in China, and what is the issue of human rights in China. That's the postscript.
Yes. In the postscript, speaking about human rights, you say that while Bush initially in his campaign rhetoric was very critical of China about their human rights abuses, later on his policy towards China became more pragmatic and realistic after his Taiwan and the Hainan incident, the certain results there. And you also speak about that with the Clinton campaign. He started out criticizing Bush's senior policy with the Butchers of Beijing, and then later on became much more pragmatic. Why do you feel there has been a difference between a candidate's campaign criticisms of China and the actual policies they create as president?
I've been following American policy toward China since probably I would say probably after President Nixon became President of the United States. Since I was to study American diplomacy, my professor gave me a lot of encouragement to do some research about U.S.-China relations. That's how I began. And after I followed Nixon's policy toward China, from Nixon to Ford to Carter to Reagan, and Reagan to George W. Bush's father, and then President Clinton, and then finally we have President George W. Bush. And almost every president, probably including maybe Nixon did not say too much about China policy because he was trying to ending the Vietnam War, and he knew that he needed China's cooperation getting the war ended in Saigon. Okay. But later on, other presidents, including President Carter, including President Reagan, including President Clinton, they all emphasized ideology, including human rights. At that time, the trade issue was not that conflict with that. There was some trade disagreement, but the primary issue was religious freedom and human rights in China. Clinton, running for President of the United States in 1992, he was emphasizing China's poor record of human rights, all that kind of ideological emphasis on China. The first 2-3 years, he wanted to press the human rights issue, religious freedom issue, and women's issue. I think it did some good to improve China's human rights records, but it did not really resolve the human rights problem. Almost he began his second term, he understand this is something that we cannot really change China's human rights record over a couple of years. It takes a long time. And maybe he became more pragmatic, not drop the human rights record issue, but just continue to pursue other national interests for the United States and China. Bush running for his presidency in year 2000 was just, he didn't follow his father's footsteps and try to have a friendly tone, friendly approach to China. I think probably because he's an advisor, foreign policy advisor.